So, after hearing from His Excellency Dr. Ahmed Al-Khalifi on Saudi Arabia's past presiding over the G20, we have the incoming G20 president, Italy, to help our attendees complete the picture of how global economic cooperation will continue to be fostered. So, to help us understand those priorities and the key deliverables of the G20 for the coming year, we now go over to Deputy Governor Perrazzelli for her to take us through and into the future and what we can expect from the G20.
Hello, good afternoon. My name's Martin Arnold. I'm the Frankfurt Bureau Chief for the Financial Times. I cover the European Central Bank and the Eurozone economy, and I'm delighted to be joining you today and especially to be talking to Alessandra Perrazzelli, who is the Deputy Governor of the Banca d'Italia. And as mentioned, Italy will, from the start of next year, be taking over the presidency of the G20. And I'm very interested to hear from Alessandra just exactly what is the priorities are going to be. So why don't we kick off with that? Hello, Alessandra. Can you hear me?
Hello, Martin. Yes, I can hear you. And hello, everybody.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we start by just looking at what are the main priorities that you see? Obviously, we've had an incredible year. 2020 has been this just extraordinary year of change, particularly with the coronavirus pandemic. But there's an awful lot going on in finance as well. What do you see as the main priorities for the Italian presidency in terms of finance going forward?
Well, I think our teams are going to be going around three words, three P's: people, planet, and prosperity. The aim is one of creating a more inclusive, more sustainable economy and society. So I think that we will bring, as a general team, a renewed attention on everything that is green and sustainable finance issues. In particular, with special attention to initiatives that are aimed at promoting a better quality data and a broader and more comparable climate-related financial disclosure. So, as digitalization and financial services innovation have been at the core of the past presidency and taking over from Governor Al-Khalifi, I confirm that these will continue to be very important cross-cutting teams in the G20 Finance Track Work Program, also under our presidency.
Great. And just talk me through on the issue of fintech and innovation there. What do you see as the main priorities within that particular part of it? We've seen, payments, digital payments have really taken off, particularly since the pandemic. That seems to have accelerated a trend that was already in process. What are your main priorities? Are you looking to encourage more of a level playing field? Are you looking at competition in this aspect?
Well, all these issues are, of course, extremely important. There are different levels that we need to look at. First of all, if we look at the issues of payment systems, of course, we need to act upon different areas. First of all, that concerns the impact that new forms of payment systems are going to have on financial stability and monetary policy. That is one area that's going to be extremely, interesting to look into, and it will also be supported by a number of initiatives that have been taken also in other fora. I mentioned in particular the Financial Stability Board. Then there are other issues that, of course, concern problems that are brought by the use of platforms in order to provide digital services, and that everything that concerns security, anti-money laundering, and issues that are connected to cyber attacks and cyber security. So these are going to be the main focus, the two main areas. Underlying all this, there is, of course, a very important a global perspective that is related to financial inclusion, inclusion in general, in order not to polarize, between parts of the globe where there are less served and less bankable areas of population. So these are going to be the main sort of the very important streams that we're going to follow in looking at fintech. Of course, there is an all other side of things which concerns competition and how the application of digitalization is going to work for the business models of the operators that today are providing financial services to people, majority of which are banks. So that's going to be the other side, and maybe we can develop this further.
Yeah, I mean, just on that,
in your next questions.
Yeah, I presume that you're referring in particular to the increased participation and involvement and innovation that we're seeing in financial services from some of the big tech groups, some of the really big technology groups, and the potential impact that could have on competition in the financial landscape. Is that a concern for you?
Well, it is something that we've seen also the European Commission has very recently in September put forward a very important piece of a report that is going to then give rise to a number of new legislative actions and new regulation in the sector. The very issue for Europe is how do we create a very inclusive and digitalized world, and whether that implies a change in the business models of those operators that traditionally provide financial services through their physical channels to implement, increase, and innovate more, invest more in the digital area. So there is an issue of level playing field, of course. There is an issue of regulation that is applicable to banks, which is not applicable to big tech. So I think that we need to go and look from a regulatory point of view of which risks are, are run, and therefore same risks, same regulations. I think that is the principle that we would like to see applied.
Yeah. So that would, I mean, for instance, some of these non-banks are exempt from a lot of the supervisory rules that govern the banking system. For instance, the Basel III rules on capital. Is that something that you're looking at as to whether the whole system of prudential supervision needs to be changed to incorporate more of these new types of players?
Well, as you know, we are part of the supervisory branch of the ECB, and these are questions that are debated at the moment, and whether there are going to be a new forms of supervision that needs to take place in order to involve also operators that do not fall within the application of Basel III or any of the regulations that have been set up in these past years in order to create more stability in the financial services market. I refer to all that body of rules that were brought forward after the 2008 crisis and that have provided more stability for European banks so far. We see it also right now with what's happening with COVID-19 crisis and the impact that this is having on the banking industry, and how more resilient the banking industry is right now compared to the 2008 big global crisis. So this is a question. I don't think there are easy answers. I do think, though, that the application of rules in order to take care of risks that are generated by the provision of services through platforms by operators which are not banking organizations need to be looked at.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. Let's just switch to the question of climate change, which is another of the big issues facing international policymakers and central bankers nowadays, and particularly this issue of disclosure of climate risks. You mentioned that in your opening remarks, Deputy Governor. Could you just expand on that? What do you hope to achieve as part of the Italian presidency? Would you like to see financial institutions disclose much more on their climate exposures? What are the hopes? What are you're aiming for?
Well, I think that technology can also have a big impact on that. And I think that what we're aiming at is to have a more clear, reliable, quality data on issues that concerns climate. And also what we would like to see is a sort of like a progress in the learning curve of financial institutions in dealing with these issues. I think that we're still behind. ESG shouldn't be just a nice to have, but they should be really part of the assessment of risks within banking institutions. And I think that technology can help there in making this learning curve more sort of steep and quick. This would definitely be part of our main items. We see this as very much combined also with the progress in technology and innovation.
Yeah, it's interesting. You see technology playing a key role in that process of improving disclosure on climate risks. And finally, on digital education, there's been quite a bit of research about how people are still struggling with the financial concepts, that the level of financial understanding of some of these financial products and financial planning needs improvement, and there is hope that fintech could achieve that. Do you see the G20 as having a role in that? What is the role of the G20?
Well, absolutely, yes. I think that G20 is the perfect place where these issues can be addressed, and I wouldn't talk only about financial education, but I would talk about financial and digital education. Okay. This thing needs to be brought together as we see more and more services that are going to be given to people, offered to people through platforms. I think that the combination of the two is going to be pivotal in order to avoid a polarization of in the globe between people with access to good digital networks and good financial information and those who don't. I think this is going to be one of the core issues throughout our presidency. And I think it's an issue that needs to be addressed both by big operators as well as startups, universities, academia, as well as central banks. It is quite an important point that we want to make with, in reference particular to those areas of the world where there is more need for investment. And, and those categories of people that are suffering right now because also COVID-19 from being away from a reliable internet provision, reliable digital networks, and have no access to the most basic banking and financial services right now. Yeah.
Can I just ask, just generally on the issue of international cooperation, particularly in the areas of finance? Do you see an improving climate for that? Because the last few years, there hasn't been a great deal of international coordination and cooperation. I think that's fair to say. But do you feel that things are changing now, that the political environment is more propitious towards coordination at a global level, at a G20 level?
Well, I think that there are two major issues that we need to look at. First of all, this pandemic has created the base for a renewed interest among the governments, among countries to do cooperate and to look at solutions that are shared. We're seeing that particularly in Europe, the pandemic did not respect any borders. These issues need to be tackled, at a very a cooperative level in Europe and the world. So I think this is one issue that probably is going to renew some interest in cooperating. The other element is the Biden administration, the administration to be. I think that we might see there more interest in increasing more coordination, more multilateralism, compared to what we have seen definitely in the last 2-3 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one area that does require more multilateral coordination and cooperation is on digital currencies. And, we've seen in Europe, we've seen the European Central Bank outline its progress towards potentially launching a digital euro. But these digital currencies are global by their very nature. They don't respect national borders. So regulation of digital currencies is going to require much more cooperation on a global level. I mean, what are your thoughts on that particular issue, which I know is a particular interest to a lot of our viewers today?
Yes, it is a fascinating issue that does require lots of global cooperation. Stable coins and now CBDCs are, at the core also of the way in which we do central banking. They're going to change the way in which we do central banking. There are a number of issues that are, of course, connected with security and with financial stability, with monetary policy that are, of course, extremely important for us as central banks. There are also a number of other issues that are connected to security in terms of, AML and the cyber issues. So I think that we're seeing now the paper that came out of the European Commission a couple of months ago. It does go into that direction. It calls for a unified digital Europe. And I think that will be the building block for Europe before, can start a dialogue with the other constituencies in the world. I think that we need to look at a digital euro. I think that is probably not going to be a substitute immediately for the other forms of payments. However, I think that this is a journey that we're going to start making now, and I know that there are going to be a number of trials, different type of trials that are going to concern, in particular, a digital euro. So I think we need to look at it. I think we need to regulate it. I think we shouldn't be shy. And it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of dialogue then there's going to be between the different regions of the world on this in particular.
I have to say, at the moment, it feels like it's more competition than coordination and cooperation on digital currencies between different, especially the major economies, all racing to be first to potentially to launch their own digital currencies, and not too much coordination there. But do you hope that you could bring everybody together in the next few months?
Well, it's called co-petition. So it's between, collaborating and, bringing together and understanding also the issues of competition. Yes, I think that's exactly what we should do. And I think that is going to be extremely relevant for, for the industry, for people, and for creating a level playing field for everybody. Just making sure that we do address, the globe in terms of inclusiveness and not so that nobody stays behind and nobody continues to be so far and distant from the use of good payment systems and the use of good services on the digital platform. So yes, I do hope that there's going to be more co-petition than competition.
Okay. And you've mentioned a couple of times anti-money laundering and financial crime and cyber risks. I mean, it's hard to think of a bigger risk for the banking system than cyber attack.
Yes.
If there, a cyber attack that was to somehow hit confidence in the banking system and make people worry whether their money is safe. And that, I mean, what's the role of the G20 in protecting the banking system from some kind of catastrophic cyber attack? I mean, how much more work do you think there is to be done on that?
Well, there is lots of work to be done. It does involve, standards. It does involve different regulations. It does involve the issue of avoiding regulatory arbitrage, of course. These are the main points that we are looking at, and that there is a lot of work done in different fora on this that probably is going to be then catalyzed by the G20, work program. The main important thing for us is just to look at a world in order to create a more, possible homogeneous set of rules that are going to avoid the creation of, regulatory arbitrage places where, there's so many differences, and the approach to risk and the approach to AML, it is so distant from the rest of the world. This is the main issue, creating a seamless module of regulation that may help avoiding, AML at a global level. Of course, this requires lots of cooperation. This requires also new skills. It requires a lot of exchange among the governments, and I do hope that we're going to make some steps towards this during our presidency that has already started on the 1st of December.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, are there particular things that you'll be looking at related to the pandemic and the coronavirus pandemic that relate to the financial system and how people still think it's not out of the woods yet, even though, as you mentioned, so far it's been played more of a constructive role than being a source of problems. But there is still concern over a potential delayed reaction in terms of defaults and non-performing loans. I mean, what kind of role can the G20 play in terms of financial stability and protecting the confidence of investors, I guess?
Yes, of course. I mean, we're not there. We're not out of the woods, as you mentioned, yet. The scenario is quite unpredictable right now. The second wave, the possibility of a third wave later in the winter. I think that we are, if we're looking at the measures that have been put forward by different governments and in Europe by the ECB, I think that there has been an amazing effort in trying to help banks in order to, continue to have that liquidity that's needed in order to foster the real economy, in order to continue to provide credit to families and to companies. At the same time, I think that banks in general are in a better position compared to where they were about 10 years ago, during the first big crisis. Also, the ability to deal with NPLs, it's, I think, a lot more ingrained into, the banking system. So I think that there's going to be, for sure, a moment of, probably a cliff moment. We have a number also of schemes that are being put forward in order to, all the moratoria on loans and everything. So we need to monitor that very closely. I do have hope, though, that, looking at banks, banks are being capitalized. They're all in a good shape. If we look at the Euro system, they should be able to bear, this specific crisis. So I'm confident we're not there yet, and I think we need to continue to look at those measures that are available in order to support the banking system so that it can support the economy.
Yeah, yeah. One area where there is, increasing importance to the banking system is on the area of data, and it's an area where you've seen quite a lot of examples of national borders, people trying to impose national borders on data, and there are questions about competition when it comes to data and how people are using data. Do you see that as an area of focus for you going forward in the next year, because it's becoming so important for the financial system?
Absolutely, yes. It's a very important for the financials, world. It's extremely important also for the protection of consumers. It's important also in the very competition that we were talking about before between the big data, the startups, and banks. So I think focusing on data, regulation is going to be one of the key areas. We've seen that also in the paper that has been issued by the European Commission. A digital world that involves a clear regulation on data is definitely what we want to see for Europe and possibly for the world.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned to me earlier in the chat that we had earlier about a hub that you're launching in Milan to look at some of these areas of prudential stability. Can you talk to me a bit more about that? That sounded extremely interesting. What's that going to be? What's that going to be doing? And what are the particular areas of focus for this new regulatory hub that you're launching in Milan?
Yes, the Milan FinTech Hub of the Bank of Italy has been launched a few days ago. And it is, we've chosen Milan because, of course, Milan is the financial hub for Italy. And it's the place where we have seen more startups growing, and there is more availability also of investment and a number of technological universities that work together within the system. We want to bring together operators, researchers, the academia. We want to make sure that we help them in finding solutions to create new industry and to change the existing industry, also to help banks become in fintech. So it's really a place where we hope to be able to provide regulatory assistance and to provide also a neutral place where they can bring about their projects, and they can experiment and move forwards towards the creation of sustainable companies as well. So companies that are able to grow and survive and scale up. So that would be our aim, and we're just starting now, so it's going to be very interesting. We're in connection with a number of hubs around the world of other central banks, and of course with Singapore as well.
Yeah, well, that sounds very exciting. Could you also just talk me through a bit more on emerging markets, because it does seem as though whilst economies like the Eurozone, like the US, China, are very advanced in some of these areas of launching digital currencies, and they're able to cope with these. Do you have concerns about some of the poorer countries, some of the smaller countries that are perhaps more exposed to things like digital currencies or stable coins being launched, or data and competition on data, do you feel like that's an area where international cooperation, coordination really is crucial to protect the interests of some of these smaller countries that perhaps don't have their own, their own digital currencies, or they're a little bit further behind in developing some of these technologies?
Well, we were talking about that earlier. Absolutely, yes. I think the G20 is actually the place where we're going to be working on making sure that there are no, as we were saying, you can look at it from, regulatory arbitrage. That means also the lack of a number of regulation that can protect people and can make sure that the digital platforms are also providing those who do not have access to banks, those who do not have access to, digital services with services and with a number of financial possibilities as it is, in the rest of the world. That's why the G20 is the place where you look at these issues, because of course, the EU, the US, and China have a number of rules already in place. They have strong on investment. They're strong on the also awareness of the impact that a number of policies are going to have on their people and their economies. So we need to make sure that that's shared with those economies and those countries where this is less so. So I think that G20 is actually the place where that has to happen.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to put you on the spot, Deputy Governor, and ask you to make a prediction as to whether the digital euro will be launched anytime soon. Do you think that the ECB will press ahead with its project next year?
I think so. I think that this is going. I think so. I think the trials are, they're starting soon. So, this should be something coming. I'm not sure what it's 2021, but soon.
Yeah, how interesting. And that will be a major change for people to be able to hold a digital currency that has a direct claim on the central bank and use that to pay for things around the world. I mean, that's pretty revolutionary, isn't it, for the financial system?
It is, and you need to understand exactly how you're going to do this. There is an issue between wholesale and retail. There are so many different areas in which we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing. So it's going to be revolutionary. I think there's going to be very rapid change in the world as we know it. I think the payment systems are going to be a drive also to a number of other changes, in the way in which financial services are actually provided. So it's big time for banks to understand that they need to change their business models. Big time for for regulatory authority to understand how you create that level playing field between the banks and non-banks, and a big time also for people, and making sure that people have access to those services in a sort of like inclusive way throughout the globe. So it is a revolutionary period of our lives. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and final in the final word for you then, in terms of 2021 and the G20 presidency, what's the overriding ambition? You mentioned the 3 Ps at the start, but if you had to put your finger on one of them, what's the main objective that you hope to achieve at the end of the presidency?
I think if I need to look at the 3 Ps, I think it's prosperity, because prosperity brings together people, brings together the planet, brings together sustainable development. I like to talk more about sustainable development and growth, because I think that we need to look at issues from a sustainability point of view. So I'm looking at prosperity as the one word that I wish upon us and upon our presidency of the G20.
Great. Well, but hopefully we'll get back to the roaring 20s and plenty of prosperity to go around. Thank you very much, Alessandra Perrazzelli. Great to talk to you, and I wish you the best of luck with the presidency from the start of next year.
Thank you so much, and thank you and goodbye to everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.
Martin, thank you so much. That was Martin Arnold of the Financial Times talking to Alessandra Perrazzelli, who is the Deputy Governor at the Bank of Italy, and they were outlining G20 financial sector priorities for 2021. Some great questions there, some fantastic answers as well. Sneaking one in on a possibility of a digital currency coming from the ECB and how confident Governor Perrazzelli was about that. She said, I think so, but wouldn't put a point on the date, saying could be 2021, it could be 2022, but it's important to do the right thing.